Okay, so I'm making a video just to kind of show you how to, change the levels of your pictures in Photoshop, create clipping masks, and also to go over like different color modes. So the color modes are typically CMYK, RGB, and grayscale. So we'll go over those color modes because those are kind of important. Um, and for those of you missing class, that's basically who this video is for. But if you want to review it, you can by watching this video. And we did go over, we did do a color exercise in class. I do have a worksheet for that. So if you miss class on Tuesday this week of week 3, then you can read this, download one of these, and then watch this video if you need help changing the colors, and then put your color change exercise in here, a PSD and JPEG file. And you do a file export as to get your JPEG file, and a save as out of Photoshop to get a PSD file for the color change exercise. So this is actually the follow along file that I put in there, but you can go ahead and download this if you want to do this at home. If you're there on during Thursday's class, then we'll just do this in class. But if you are at home, for whatever reason, then go ahead and just download this. You can watch this video, try to follow along if you want. It's going to help you learn some of these techniques that you'll need to know to complete your self-portrait project in Photoshop. Sorry. So, okay, so we'll launch Photoshop. I was working on this earlier, but okay, and then let's just say we downloaded that out of Brightspace. We do that by pushing this arrow and then just pushing download, and that'll pop into your downloads folder. Whether you have a PC or a Mac, it'll go into your downloads. The label of the file is followalong.jpg. It's a JPEG file extension. So this is a JPEG file. So we'll go into Photoshop, we'll open that up, we'll do File, Open, and then I'm going to navigate to my downloads folder and open this follow along JPEG that we downloaded out of Brightspace. Okay, I'm going to move this out of the way because it's over my layers panel. Okay, so this is locked. This is the layers panel. We want to be in Workspace Essentials Classic, so it'll look like this. If you aren't in this workspace, just go to Window, Workspace, Reset Essentials Classic, and you'll be in the correct workspace. I'm going to pop this out because that's how I like to look at my tools panel. And then here's the layers. This is a pretty important panel. The properties panel is also important. But the layers panel is probably going to be, these two panels are probably going to be your main panels that you'll use. And so we're going to actually use the selection tool to select part of this image because we are going to create a clipping mask. And with your Photoshop self-portrait project, I am wanting you to create a clipping mask. So let's just go ahead and unlock this by clicking on the lock icon here. It was automatically locked. We can quickly unlock it by clicking on that. And then we have our layer selected. You can tell that it's selected when it's kind of gray, lighter gray. Sorry. So over here, this is one of the areas that has different selection tools in it for selecting different parts of your image, basically. So we have the quick selection tool, we have the magic wand tool, we have the object selection tool, which is a newer tool. This came out in 2019. But if we click and hold on this, that's where you see all these different options underneath this one tool, basically. So that if there is like a little arrow in the corner of this icon, that means that there's just more options underneath. So let's go to the object selection tool. This is kind of a cool tool. So it will select objects out of your image that you have open in Photoshop. So we have this image of this man standing in a hallway. So let's just click and try to drag a box and hold down on your mouse and then let up and just try to get a decent selection. So the object select tool is really nice because the software of the computer is really good at recognizing the object that you just dragged your cursor over. So that is going to work really well for doing a rough selection of what we're trying to select, which is this man here. So once we get it to this stage, let's go to select and mask up here. It's kind of like a little button up at the top. So just click on that. And so we kind of enter this new zone of selection here. And it looks like I have kind of a weird area here that, let's see. Let's cancel out of this really quick. Yeah, let's go back to select and mask. I'm not sure why that's pulling in. It's kind of weird. Oh, it's just a glitch in my computer. Sometimes it acts a little glitchy, but so we have our area selected. We can see our selection pretty well if we zoom in, and it's actually done a pretty good job. Now with him, he has a lot of hair, and hair is actually one of the hardest things to select in a photo. So we can actually do a few things kind of by hand in a way. So this is, I call this kind of the select and mask zone, because we're in the select and mask zone. So this interface looks a little different. So some of the main tools we'll be using in the select and mask zone, they still have an object selection tool, they have a lasso tool, polygon lasso tool, zoom tool, hand tool. But these three, and mostly this one and this one, so the quick selection and the brush tool, are going to be pretty much your best friends in here. You might end up using the refine edge brush tool, but I don't use it a ton. So what we'll do is we'll click on the quick selection tool again within the select and mask interface, and let's go, we can change the size of it if we want to. I'm going to keep mine at 13. It seems like a good size, and I'm going to actually maybe add a little bit to my selection at this point. So with the plus icon up here, I can add to my selection. So let's go over here in the properties panel and kind of go scroll up. You can actually scroll in here. There's a bar here that you can grab and scroll, but scroll up to the very top, and then you can kind of change the transparency a little bit. I'm going to change mine to around 41% so I can kind of see what I'm doing. And then if you do Command plus or Control plus on a PC and zoom in and use your space bar, you'll get a little hand. You can also just use the hand tool and then get back to that quick selection tool with the plus. And then let's just start adding in some of these strands that he has in his hair, just so that it's not totally, and you can just click one time on them typically, or maybe drag a little bit, and you can kind of start to bring in a little bit more of that hair in your selection just to make your clipping a little bit more realistic. So we're just going to kind of do a quick, I'm not going to bring in every little single piece of hair that's there, but I'm going to bring some of the major ones that may have been missed. I'm going to Command Z that because that brought in way too much. I just wanted to bring in this one area here. That's a little tough, but anyway, that's not too bad. And then we want to subtract areas too. So let's go in and use the minus tool. We're still on the quick selection tool over here. Let's minus some of this just by clicking. And like this is the background color, so we'll try to get rid of this. We can click and drag, much like we did with his hair, to bring his hair back. But it's kind of a fine balance between adding and subtracting. But if you kind of just keep working at it, you can refine it to where it looks pretty decent. Pretty close to, I'm going to take some of this out too because there's quite a bit of background in there. And here, maybe a little bit. I'm still subtracting from my selection, just trying to get that background out of there. Clicking and dragging, holding down on my mouse as I do it, or my cursor. I'm going to take a little bit more of that out that I brought back in, because it actually brought in a little bit more than I wanted it to. Try to get rid of some of that. And let's kind of go around the edge. There's kind of a hard line right here. Maybe we'll, oops, I didn't mean to, Command Z. Maybe we'll use the paintbrush tool. And this is just a manual adding and subtracting with the tool. So I'm just going to draw that in. And as you can see, the paintbrush tool, you literally can draw with it. I'm going to Command Z that. Okay. Command Z will just take you back a step or two, and I can do that. Oops, I'm adding Command Z. We want to subtract, and I'm using the paintbrush tool right now. I'm subtracting with that. And I'm just going to draw this by hand, just to clean it up a little bit. We can also still use that quick selection tool too. They both work pretty well. But that is pretty close to what we're looking at. I just did a Command 0 or Control 0 on PC, Command 0 on a Mac. And then let's just check out our selection really quick. That's not too bad. Let's do another Command plus. Use the space bar to get the hand tool. Let up on the space bar to, get rid of the hand tool if you need to. So we kind of have some clunky areas here we might want to refine. I'm going to minus some of this, I think, from the selection. I just don't know if Photoshop kind of knew what to do with this area here. It's kind of difficult for Photoshop to recognize what's going on here. So, but overall, the selection is pretty decent. That'll do, definitely. And so we can turn this back up if we want to, or, you know, that's the transparency. Let's scroll down in this area. So feather is right here. And this is a nice one too, because you can just feather it. And that'll just blur the edges by a little bit, just to kind of soften it up so that there's no hard lines. And it just kind of makes the clip look a little bit better. So let's just bring that feather. I wouldn't go over 3. You know, 2 pixels to 3 pixels is usually kind of a sweet spot. If you go much over that, it starts to look kind of cheesy, so you don't want to go too far with the feather. But I suggest maybe feathering a little bit when you clip. And then let's just scroll all the way to the bottom. Make sure, you know, that you have this scrolled all the way to the bottom. Output selection 2, and we'll do a layer mask. And yep, layer mask is fine. Push OK. And as you can see, if we look in the layers panel, now here's our thumbnail of our original image, but this is the layer mask that's linked to it over the top of it. So we still have our original image with all of our information, but we just have this layer mask in black and white here, which tells us we have that over the top of our image. So we can see that he's clipped now. And so one way to save this out to preserve the transparent background, if you're trying to have a transparent background in your Photoshop or in a document, we do a file, export as, and then we can do a PNG, and transparency needs to be enabled. So you can see in this preview that we have that checkered dotted background, which means transparency. Export that. You know, maybe I'll just put it on my desktop, but definitely have a documents folder with, actually I'll show you what you should do. Documents folder, graphic design 231. Let's just make a new folder. Clipping demo, create, go in there, we'll save this PNG in there. That'll have that transparent background, so you can bring that into another Photoshop document if you want to. Do a file, place embedded to bring it into a different Photoshop document. And then we can also do file, save as, and we'll save this same follow along file in that same folder. And we'll make sure the format is a Photoshop file, which will have a .psd extension. Photoshop files have all the layers. They're the working file. They're the native file out of Photoshop. And they are high quality, and they do preserve transparency as well. So save that. And then, you know, if you ever need a JPEG, you do file, export as, change this to JPEG. And you can make the quality better, like excellent. Export that. See, JPEGs don't have transparent backgrounds, so it's gonna add in that white background if you save out a JPEG. That's why a PNG is good, or a Photoshop PSD file is good as well, because that transparent background will be preserved. So that's basically how you clip. If you go image mode, we can make this in CMYK color mode. And this is important if you go to print to have all of your files in CMYK color mode. CMYK are the cartridges in your printer. So it's going to match up all the colors of this document to the cartridges in your printer. So we can do a Command S, and that'll save over the PSD file. And then let's do color image mode grayscale and make this black and white. And this is how you would make your image black and white. We can do a file, save as, and we can name this one black and white, just so we know, you know, and we'll keep it at a Photoshop file. Save that. We can also export out a PNG if we needed a PNG file. PNG files are smaller than PSD files, but I don't think PNG files like to be in CMYK color mode, so you're probably going to have to use a PSD file for that. And then if you do Command L on your keyboard or Control L, we can actually use the levels panel. And this is all the whites in your document, and this is all the blacks in your document. So if we do that, actually you can do it here too. Clicking on that, I'm going to run out of time, but you can change this to be brighter, and then the brights to be bright and the darks to be darker, or the midtones to be different. So that's a nice thing to do with black and white and color photos, just to make them pop a little bit more. It's nice to go in and actually edit every photo you use in a document to make it look as good as it can. And that's basically what I'm going to be talking about on Thursday's class.